various aircraft to bomb the beaches before they landed, and to land paratroopers to get early scouts out.
Okay. Lots of people, lots of boats, lots of people, and if you watched, what is it, Saving Private Ryan, there's a big scene at the beginning of that movie where you just see massive amounts of death, carnage, people being shot up on the beach. So typically if you ask someone about D-Day, they're thinking about people coming ashore and with boats, etc. But really, D-Day was a lot about air power. Air power was a significant contribution, and how so? So how could air power contribute to people landing on a beach?
They could just, well, I mean, there's water, they could fly over the water and actually land like on the beach instead of like on the beach and land.
They could land people on the beach. How else could air power help?
People jumping out of it like parachutes.
Parachutes? What else? Someone else jump in. What else can air power help?
They're able to drop bombs on the beaches to try and clear it out before the infantry moved in.
Lots of bombs. But they couldn't take, go ahead.
They could also scout, just as paratroopers would. They could be able to tell you whether or not they saw a big replacement of people or
Help them know where things were, help blow things up. They could also go up and down the beaches and shoot their guns at people on the beach. So air power for days before the invasion, although they didn't know where the invasions were coming from, for days those beaches were being bombed and things that the Allies tried to take out. So air power prepared the invasion for the infantry. Is that a definition?
Infantry.
What is infantry? Sam?
Ground forces usually proceeding by foot.
So, very good. So, soldiers armed and trained to fight on foot. You don't even have your book, do you?
No, it's
Nice job. So, soldiers armed and trained to fight on foot. So, I mentioned the German Air Force started using air power. That's one. The United States is brought into the war with the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor. That's the second. Air power was significant in D-Day. That's the third. And then we talked about, what's the fourth major use of air power?
when we dropped the 2 bombs on Japan.
The ending of the war in Japan when we dropped the 2 bombs. So air power played a significant role in World War II. Mentioned up front, World War I, air power is still pretty novel. Paper, well, not plastic, but paper and wood airplanes, bombs that they put in their laps and would throw out. By the end of World War I, they started to get metal planes. They started to get heavier bombs, upwards of 2,000 pounds. Still a novel idea. There was a large battle, St. Miguel, where they took 1,500 of the biplanes and attacked Germany. They did really well, and that's talked about Billy Mitchell, or talked about the early advocates of air power. That's when they really got interested to see a separate air force, because they saw what air power could do. So at the end of World War II, it's starting to come into its own. At the end of, as I said too, at the end of World War I, started to come into its own. And then the development of aircraft really spiked, really went fast, because people didn't want to have a World War I again. They never wanted to fight World War I again, because it was pretty miserable, even though death is death is death. But how did a lot of people die in World War I?
Diseases in the trenches.
Diseases, trenches, pretty miserable existence. So the airplane can just fly over those trenches, go right over them. So air power went to the forefront of what people tried to develop after World War I. And actually during World War I, they tried to develop as quickly as possible. Ms. Connors, read that first bullet, would you please?
During the Second War, long-range bombers saw lots of action.
Okay. Keep going, would you?
The Allies and Axis powers used their aircraft to destroy airfields, supply lines, and military bases.
Go ahead. We like your reading.
They also used aircraft to try to break the will of power for people. In fact, civilians were often targeted. For the first time in history, air power was the key to victory.
Some significant bullets up there. So, as I mentioned, long-range bombers allowed both sides, but primarily the Allies, to fly over trenches, to fly over places that they didn't need to fight. They could take the fight to the enemy. In this case, it was Germany. And they were able to destroy bridges, they were able to destroy manufacturing, came into its own. Civilians were targets during the Battle of Britain for that year. Over 40,000 Britons, civilians, were killed due to the bombing. And the Allies were no different, although not specifically targeted. In Japan alone, prior to dropping of the atom bomb, what did the United States and Great Britain, what did they drop in Germany? What kind of bombs? Anyone remember? Anyone know?
Incendiary?
Right. What's that mean? What's incendiary?
It means they start a fire when they touch the ground.
Big fire.
Mr. Powell, see Mr. Baker. Josh, you see Mr. Baker.
Uh-oh. See you next year, guys. I hope the suspension, I hope you have fun during the suspension. So they dropped bombs that started fire. Anyone want to take a guess what primarily all of Japan was built with at that time in terms of their structures, buildings? Wood. And what does fire do to wood?
Makes it burn.
Burn. So more people died, more destruction happened due to the firebombing of Japan than the 2 atom bombs that were used. So again, big bullet there for aerospace, so let's hear it for the Air Force. Obviously, the more faith that you have in air power, the more you're going to use it. Once you have faith in it, then you got to develop how are you going to use it. Even Billy Mitchell. Did we watch Billy Mitchell in here?
Yes.
Did we? You said no initially, now yes. What was Billy Mitchell's claim to fame for at least this lesson?
He predicted the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Predicted the bombing, but what was he what was he in favor of? What did he want to see?
He wanted the Air Force to become its own independent branch of the armed forces.
Independent branch. So he knew back in World War I what airplanes could do. During World War II, the rest of the world found out what it could do. And then once you have this tool, you got to figure out how to use it. There's lots of things. These computers do a lot. At least on my part, I don't know how to use them all the way, so I don't take full advantage. No different than the airplane. There are ways to have these airplanes, someone needed to figure out the best way to use them. In Africa, there was lots of fighting going on in Africa. Germany took control of Africa for what reason? I'm sorry?
Imperialism.
Imperialism, but what did they get from imperialism by taking over a country?
Like more territory.
More territory, resources. So they needed all the resources that Africa could provide them. They needed waterways to get oil to and from their country, and that's what Africa provided for them. Talking about the way of using airplanes. Initially, when the Allies had bases throughout Africa, when they were attacked by German aircraft, that base tried to defend itself. So the Germans would fly, overwhelm the base, destroy it, and that base was sort of on its own. Eventually, air power folks realized, well, we should bring all the airplanes in Africa under one person's guidance, so that when one base is targeted, you make a call to all your Air Force friends, and they come and they attack. And so that's called centralized control. Do you have that for a definition? No?
No.
But it's called centralized control. So if one place is being attacked, you make a call to the top dog calls all the fighters that are in range to help, and that's what happens. So eventually, with that tactic of using that tactic with the new aircraft, new technology of aircraft, the Allies were able to gain control of the skies of Africa. And if you have control of the skies, what's that mean to the ground? You can control the ground. Once you win the air war, you can win the ground war. You can't win the ground war unless you control the air. So it was significant in terms of tactics and way to use it. What's the name of the German Air Force?
Luftwaffe.
Luftwaffe. A war conducted with great speed and force. Blitzkrieg. The coordinated efforts of different military branches such as air power and ground. What's that called?
Combined arms.
Say it louder.
Combined arms.
Combined arms. I think you already have Blitzkrieg, but it's there if you want to see it in writing. Just some of those bullets are what I've just been talking about. At the end of World War I, there were restrictions put on Germany. They were not allowed to have a military air force. They were allowed to build commercial aircraft. So those sneaky Germans, what did they do? They built a military air force anyways. They trained their pilots in Africa. So by the time Hitler took control, they had an air force. They had a squad. By 1932, Germany's military air force had 3 bomber squadrons, 4 fighter squadrons, 8 observation squadrons, 1,500 pilots, and 3,000 pilots in training. Well, Mr. O'Neill, what is a squadron? Is that a definition on your sheet? What's a squadron?
It's like a team of pilots.
I don't expect it. It's an Air Force unit consisting of 2 or more flights. So a squadron is an Air Force unit consisting of 2 or more flights. And Selena, that's a good follow-up question. What's a flight? What is a flight?
An act of passing through the air on wings. And
Oh, no, that is, but in terms of squadron, flight, you're right, that is true, but what's a flight?
Isn't it just like a team of people, like we're like Alpha Flight, and then you've got the next class,
You're-
Bravo?
Yes, go
Is
ahead.
there like 2 or more elements?
There you go. So you've got squadron, flight, elements. A squadron is made up of 2 or more flights. A flight is a unit that has 2 or more elements. And I think you have probably definitions for a squadron and a flight. So a flight is a unit that has 2 or more elements. And an element has
2 or more people.
2 or more people, or in this case, we're talking about the Air Force, we're talking about airplanes. 2 airplanes flying together would be considered an element. So if you have 2 elements, then you have a flight. And then if you have 2 flights, you have a squadron. So now you've got some Air Force terminology.
Can
Yes,
you
sir.
repeat the definition for combined arms?
Who has that?
Or remember what's up there now?
Is it up there?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, yeah. You repeat it for us.
The coordinated efforts of different military branches, such as air and ground.
Much better to work as a team. I think we'll probably skip to the 80s after World War II, and this will come into play in terms of combined arms. Horrible in World War II. Army people couldn't talk to Army, but they certainly couldn't talk to the Air Force arm. They couldn't talk to the Navy. No communications. So when you're working with different branches of the service, you really need to have the tools and the toys to be able to talk with one another. That, more to come on that one. Talked about what they did in Africa, tactical. 2 terms, tactical, strategic. You have those? Anyone want to take a guess? What's tactical mean?
Plan out to like to perform a certain task or something, like strategically.
Well, strategic is a different term.
Designed to strike at the source, I guess.
I think that would work. You want to take?
Can I just? read
Sure,
this?
yeah.
Okay. Involving military operations that are smaller, closer to base, and less long-term significance than strategic operations.
Yeah, so two terms, tactical and strategic. Tactical is that book definition. Involves military operations that are smaller, closer to base, and less long-term significance than strategic operations. So you've got tactical, close in, actually pulling the trigger and putting a bullet in somebody or something, dropping a bomb on someone or something. Tactical. Strategic, you want to fly a long distance in terms of the Air Force. You want to take out the source of what can bring destruction to you. So if you can knock out a factory, if you can knock out a government, if you can knock out a city, that would be considered strategic. Both strategic and tactical were used for World War II. In terms of tactical, does anyone want to see the tactical involves military operations smaller, closer to base, and less long-term significance than strategic operations? Ms. Boyd, what was the three-point plan tactically in Africa?
Air's pride.
Superiority. What's that mean? Well, guess. What do you think? Superiority. What's it mean? To be good. To be good or to be the
Best.
the best. Thank you. So it's the best. So you want to control the skies. So that was the plan for Africa.